of Women and Resistance. And first things first, apologies, we were not here last week due to technical hitches, and yeah, but we're back. And today we are going back 3,000 years. But before we do that, I am your host, Adesoji Iginla, and with me, my co-host today, my sister from another mother, Sister Aya Fubara Eneli Esquire. How are you, sis?
I am doing really well. And of course, I am not dressed as the person we're going to be speaking about. And I think it's important to highlight that
Mm,
because um, this work has kind of taken on its own spirit. And certainly, when we first conceptualized it, there was no vision of embodying the woman that we would cover. And that just happened organically, starting with Billie Holiday.
yeah.
However, I do want to emphasize, and I think I've said this before for those of your viewers who've been very consistent, that there is definitely a spiritual component to this. And sometimes um, it's very difficult for me to access uh, these ancestors. Tony Cade Bambara was one who required me to go to the water, to pour libation, to do a lot of different things before she finally would give me some access. And in the case of the great Pharaoh that we will be discussing today, whose tomb and temple I was actually privileged to visit just last week, she remains an enigma. She was an enigma during her life. She remains an enigma after her death. There are all kinds of books that are still being published about her, some of them with very fantastical ideas and notions. And I simply could not access her
Mm.
spiritually in the same way. And so a little bit of eye makeup, but beyond that, we will be talking about Hatshepsut in the way that I've been able to access her, but not her spirit speaking through me.
Okay, that said, how do you pronounce her name, by the way?
Hatshepsut. And of
Okay.
course, she actually had many names.
Mm.
Her her given name is Hatshepsut. That was the name she was given at birth, and that name stands for foremost of noble women. That was her birth name, Hatshepsut. It's her
Okay.
personal name, emphasizing her nobility and her femininity. And we will talk a little bit more about her lineage because she comes from a very strong royal lineage. But then she also had a throne name, which was Ma'at Kare, which is Ma'at is the soul of Ra. And so when you study ancient Egypt, Kemet as we call it, very much there was no concept of separation of church and
And
state.
state.
And so pharaohs actually got their right to govern from the gods. There had to be that divinity that was a part of it.
Mm.
And so her throne name reflects that she was actually chosen by the gods. And there's a scene in one of the temples that actually shows the god Amun, crowning her. It gives the pharaohs a sense of legitimacy.
Mm-hmm,
Um,
mm-hmm.
but she also had a Horus name, which is Waserkawe, which stands for mighty of Kas, mighty of souls. And it associated her with Horus, the god of kingship, and emphasized her divine strength, right? And then she also had a Nepti name, Waj Emput, flourishing of years, which was linked to the protective goddesses of the upper and lower Egypt and symbolized stability and longevity. And we know that she had a very prosperous and peaceful reign. And then she also has a golden Horus name, which is Netjeret Kau, divine of appearances. And this name stressed the eternal and divine kingship, presenting her as both sacred and eternal. So many, many names, but her birth name, her name at birth was Hatshepsut.
Okay. Before we continue, can you turn up your volume a bit? Uh,
Okay, people can't hear
yeah.
me. Let's see where I do that. Does this is this louder?
Okay.
No. Let's see. Is that louder?
Uh,
Louder? No. Louder?
tr- yeah.
Louder?
You're still. You're still.
Still faint.
Yeah.
Louder now?
Yes. Yes.
Much
Will.
is it louder now?
Yeah. It's loud to a point. I would get feedback from the listeners
Okay,
and
let me
viewers.
move closer to the mic. Is it louder now?
Okay. You want to try again?
Louder now? Can you hear me better now?
Yeah, it's much more manageable. I would wait
Still
for feedback.
faint?
No, 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 it's good. I mean, I can hear you maybe because I'm using
The
headphones.
headphones?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so,
Well, let's see what the people say.
yeah, exactly.
Her
So,
volume is low. Henry said volume is low. Henry, is the volume louder now? Yes. Okay.
okay,
We're
yes,
good.
thank you. Thank you, Karen.
We're good. Thank you.
Okay, so by virtue of the names that you just uh, mentioned earlier, it shows that um, not only was she divinely crowned, but she was also straddling two lines because the various names indicate that she had some presence in the afterlife even before she got there. And she was also present in the time she was ruling. So, whilst you were there, did you notice anything that gave you a notion of what her purpose was specifically as Pharaoh? Because I understand she was regent first. She was regent with,
She was a co-regent.
yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So, I should say that in the sense of the various names, that
Mm,
that was very common for the pharaohs. She fit in right with the tradition of the pharaohs. They
okay.
had a given name, a birth name, and then they would have a name that they would take on as a consequence of becoming pharaoh and
Hmm.
showing that they have been indeed their reign basically has been ordained by the gods, has been approved of by the gods. And
Okay.
so she fit right in line with what was typical of her time.
Okay.
In fact, some have made the argument that because many of the remaining statues and drawings that we have of Hatshepsut showed her in full what is called, some would say, male regalia, that perhaps she was trying to erase her femininity. But really, what we're saying is male is actually just the king regalia, or and king is even the wrong term. It's pharaoh, and pharaoh does not have, it's not gendered.
Mm, okay.
Now we do know that it was pretty much some would argue an anomaly to
Mm.
have a woman in the place of Pharaoh, although she was not the first
Oh.
quote unquote female Pharaoh. I'll share a little bit about that. But what we do know is that there was a certain look and regalia that the pharaohs wore, and she, as pharaoh, wore that same regalia. The only pharaoh that kind of veered away from that in the busts and the statues that remain is Akhenaten, and he was definitely a renegade of some sorts. You would have to go on this tour that we went on to get more of a sense. Of course, do more of the studies. For those of you who might be in
Imagination.
narrative that starts with so K and then narrative. Um, if you join Nubia, starting with the K, not Nubia, the people that I was with just a few days ago, which is a whole other story, which we'll not go into today. Um, there is Dr. Beatty, Dr. Mario Beatty, who is, I would say, one of the leading Egyptologists across the world, certainly in the United States, teaches a weekly meta nature course. Some people call it the hieroglyphics, and you can definitely get more into that. But
Okay.
in terms of Hatshepsut, there had been another female pharaoh, um Merenith, in the first dynasty. So this was 3000 BCE, BCE being before the Common Era. Um, some say that she likely ruled as a regent for her son Den, but was buried with full royal honors at Abydos, which we also got to visit.
Visit. Okay.
And her name appears on king lists, suggesting that she was recognized as a pharaoh. Another pharaoh who was female from the 12th dynasty was Sobekne Pharaoh, and this was the first woman fully confirmed to rule Egypt as pharaoh in her own right, not
Right.
as a
Okay.
co-regent.
Okay.
She took the throne after the death of her brother, um, and I believe her brother's name, if I'm not mistaken, her brother's name was Amenemhat the Fourth, when there was no male heir, and she
Mm.
ruled for about 3 to 4 years. And then we have Hatshepsut in the 18th dynasty, and then we have Nefertiti also in the 18th dynasty, although that's debated as well. However, it's important as we in the 21st century try to put our modern lens on what happened 3,000 years ago. It's important to note that even though there were few quote unquote female pharaohs,
Mm-hmm.
that women actually ran Egypt for a significant amount of time, either as co-regents or as the mothers of the
The,
next, the king who was a minor or something of that nature, and that
okay.
they played a very significant role in the goings on, if you will, and the politics and the governance of Egypt. And so in this book, Hatshepsut, the female pharaoh, written by Joyce Tildesley, she this is this is like her third edition, but she actually goes through in earlier editions the fact that women in Egypt had significantly more rights or were treated as co-equals in a way that women in modern times in the
Mm.
West still have not attained. So, for example, we are talking today about Hatshepsut, who reigned 1473 through 1458 BCE, right?
Yep.
And here we are in 2025 in the United States of America, where I reside right now, and a woman has never become president of this country. So, when people want to put lenses on things or to critique a time or place of people, you almost want to remind them to turn that lens on themselves and to
Mm.
understand that the issue shouldn't really be how many female pharaohs existed in ancient Egypt. It's the fact that up to today, you all haven't even seen fit to be able to elect a female president in the United States of America. So just wanted to put that. Yes, and I see. So this is going to be a little different from how we've done our presentation in the past. I'll probably be responding more to people in the chat because I'm not embodying the spirit of anybody. I'm just going to be sharing information. But Karen in the chat definitely visited these sites 2 years ago. We were roommates on
Oh.
that trip.
Okay.
And her temple, which I will tell you more about, is simply magnificent. It was carved out of a rock. It's in the cliffs. It is carved into a mountain. It's carved out of a mountain. And
Okay. So,
it's like it's something that you have to behold.
for, I mean, maybe a wrong comparison, but comparison all the same. Would that be like Mount Rushmore?
Mount Rushmore would be like me playing with plasticine or Play-Doh compared to what these people did, right? No, there's no comparison. It's like the U.S. and the Washington D.C. Capitol. They have what they call an obelisk,
Mm-hmm.
which is not the name that the ancient Egyptians called it. It was a techno, but the Tekken, sorry, but the one in Washington D.C. is comprised of like multiple stones and things that they've put together to create that obelisk, that technique. But in for Hatshepsut, in the work that she did, and she still has she has the tallest surviving, I'll call it obelisk for the sake of our listeners, in Egypt and across the world. It's over 100 feet tall. It's carved from one single stone.
Stone.
Yes. So we
Wow.
actually visited the quarry where the obelisks were carved out of the ground. And it's amazing without all these so-called modern technology, the technology they used using the sycamore tree, where you make a hole and then you put a piece of sycamore wood in,
Mm-hmm.
and then you pour water. The wood absorbs the water and expands, and
Oh.
then lifts it's simply, and you talk about sustainable technology, insane. But anyway, hers is carved from one single slab. And we got to learn more about how these the obelisks were quarried, because they had one that they had already done significant work on,
Mm-hmm.
and then there was a crack in it.
I was about to ask that question. What happens when you make mistakes?
You abandon it and you start all over again, because they did not mishmash things. It had to be one
Peace.
intact piece. Yes. um but that's just to share a little bit about the technology and the vision of ancient Kemites, if you will, in this part of Hatshepsut's rule. But her temple, to talk about Mount Rushmore in the same sentence, it's completely,
Okay.
no, you cannot at all.
Point taken. Point taken.
It would be again like a little child just learning how to play with crayons and can't even hold it right, compared to like a master artist, what they were able to do, and with what the tools back then to
Mm.
create entire temples with rooms with designs that allowed, based on when the sun rises
Mm-hmm.
and sets on specific days, for that sun to hit directly on the face of a pharaoh, or for the star to shine directly through a particular hole once every 100 years, or even understanding the whole quote unquote Milky Way and the astronomy as we know it now. And when people talk about, well, what are you Capricorn, are you Sagittarius, all of that, these ancestors of ours had already figured out. And
Mm.
it's something to behold. So let me stop there and answer more specifically the questions that you raise.
So, uh, in the chats, okay. I mean, you've taken Karen's thoughts. So people are just retorting that, yes, I can laugh with regards to you calling the work of Mount Rushmore akin to someone playing with plasticine. Yes, don't.
Absolutely. Absolutely no comparison what our ancestors were able to do, and that it has endured in the way that it has. Some buried under sea, some buried under sand, and vandalized in the way that it was vandalized, and tomb robbers, and um, the Coptic Church, and the Arabs, and all the different people who came in to try to deface it,
Mhm,
to try and erase history. And certainly, when we talk about Hatshepsut, we can talk about the different theories behind why she perhaps was erased, or there was an attempt to erase her from history for thousands of years. She's only now really being rediscovered. So I should say this: Hatshepsut was definitely, again, and this is using modern day language, born a princess, if you will.
mhm,
um Her father was her father, her grandfather were all part of the royal lineage. I will go more into detail with that. She married her half brother, who was Pharaoh. He died very young. They had a daughter together, but not a son. But she was the royal wife. However, the Pharaoh had other lesser wives, if you will, and concubines. And so um, an heir was born to him by
mm,
quote unquote a lesser wife. And that was Thutmose the second, and he was an infant when his father died. Some say infant, some say toddler. And so she became co-regent with him, but then eventually became full out Pharaoh herself. And then, of course, after her death, he, Thutmose the second, Thutmose the third, I'm sorry, became her stepson became the Pharaoh.
yeah,
Um, but she ruled for more than 2 decades, 21 years actually, and it is a time that is considered part of the golden era of
okay.
Egypt, because these were decades of peace, of prosperity, and of monumental achievement. She did so much to build within Egypt itself. Many of her predecessors, and then those who came after her,
After her.
it was about conquest, it was about securing the borders, a lot of military warfare, if you will. And I guess there might be a lesson here just in terms of the importance of women leading as well.
Mhm,
As someone who I just got back from Nubia and Aswan, and we visited Cairo and Luxor, and studying um, much of what we're going to be talking about today. What continuously struck me was the feats of our ancestors, but the focus on conquest and on um, creating these monuments to themselves and to their gods, if you will, and wondering what would have happened if, and there may be some Egyptian historians who will disagree with me,
mm,
but what would have happened if more of the focus had been on building up the people. So there was definitely a very clear hierarchy in Egypt.
in the
You had
society.
the royal family, then you had their advisors, the noblemen and women, if you will, and then you had some other learned people, the scribes, you had the skilled workers, and then you had all the other people. But there was definitely a hierarchy that was in place. And I think, and Ayikwa Ama would make this
Yeah.
argument, that these very rigid hierarchies made us more susceptible to what eventually happened across Africa in terms of Ama, what some people call the slave trade.
Mhm,
Um, but to understand Hatshepsut, we need to understand her royal bloodline. So the 18th dynasty began with Amos I around 1550 BCE. He expelled the foreign invaders, he reunified Egypt, he ushered in what was considered the new kingdom, and his queen was Amhos Amos Nefertari. She was very much revered and later on deified, actually. And together, they were the founding ancestors of Hatshepsut's dynasty.
Mm,
Their son, Amenhotep I, followed on the throne. He is remembered as both a builder and a warrior, but he left no male heirs. And he's often counted as Hatshepsut's grandfather. So
mm.
this wasn't just, oh, I'm married to the
To
Pharaoh and now I'm going to be Pharaoh. Like, this woman had sat at the feet, had lived the life, had understood the entire history and culture. She was very learned herself, right?
yeah, yeah.
And so after his death, so after the death of Amenhotep I, his throne passed to Thutmose I, a skilled general who became pharaoh, and then he married Queen Amos. So all of these pharaohs, if they weren't in the direct lineage, would
They
then
had,
marry a
yeah,
woman who was in the direct lineage, because the idea was you had to have this royal bloodline, right? And that
correct.
is a sense of your legitimacy to the throne. And again, referencing Ayikwa Ama, if you go back to his book 2000
As the
Seasons, the
seasons, yeah.
question is what happens when people are ascending to these positions of leadership but don't have the character or haven't really developed the skills, right?
Yeah. What
Um,
happened in 2000 season would happen.
yes. So from this union of Thutmose I and Queen Amos, Hatshepsut was born in 15, they say about 1507 BCE. So she was not just another royal child, because she was the daughter of the great royal wife, the highest ranking queen. That made her claim to the dynastic lineage far stronger than her half brothers,
Mm.
right? So here is this general who's become pharaoh. He's married the queen who has the actual royal lineage. Their children have more of the legitimacy of the
Legitimacy
royal line
as opposed
than
to her.
any other woman that he marries who is not, or sleeps with, who is not of that royal lineage, and then they have a child, right? So he did have children, heirs born to secondary wives, but she was the one who was born to the great royal wife. Well, when her father died, as was the custom back then,
Mm.
Hatshepsut married her half brother, Thutmose II. And this was a common practice back then to keep the royal bloodlines consolidated. We can argue whether that was the best scientific decision, biological decision to be made,
Mm.
but it was
That's
something that was done nonetheless. Together, they had one daughter, Neferure, who would be raised to hold one of the most powerful religious offices in Egypt, but she was not male. Thutmose II apparently was weakly and sickly. That is what they are saying from exhuming and examining his mummified body. It is said that he died in either his late 20s or early 30s, leaving behind only one male heir, who was Thutmose III, a toddler not born of Hatshepsut, but of another wife, Iset. So the line of succession was shaky. The heir was a child, and the throne was now vulnerable. And into this fragile opening, if you will, stepped in Hatshepsut.
okay. Okay.
But what she did, as all the other pharaohs had done before her as well, is she didn't just rely on her bloodline. And I'm sure that she was obviously aware that most of the pharaohs had been male,
Male, yeah.
and that there would be some people who
Who
would
will push back?
challenge
Yeah.
her legitimacy. I'm looking through the chat now to see what people are saying, just to see if it ties in with what I'm saying now. Okay, we'll keep on. Karen says the hierarchy and the concentration and hoarding of power through lineage was their society's greatest flaw, weakness. I would say it was definitely part of it. Um,
Karen May says she was on the bus 2 years ago and took some pictures, and probably this session would help bring some clarity to those photos.
Absolutely.
Um,
Um, so Hatshepsut didn't just rely on her royal bloodline. She made her claim divine, and she understood that this was important, just as the pharaohs before her had done.
mhm.
Because if a pharaoh has to be crowned by, if their reign has to be approved of by the gods, then you want to make sure that you present that information to the people. As I walked through the temples, I'm a very beginning reader of Meta Nature, and trying to take in, and of course a lot of it has been destroyed, but there's a lot that you can still decipher, trying to take in all of the inscriptions and the drawings on the temple walls. What struck me is that these writings were, in a sense, the propaganda of their time. So today
Mm.
we have social media, we have the news media, we have books, and we have
Art, art
newspapers
itself,
and things of that nature. And
statues.
what way would politicians get their word out? They would do interviews, or there would be opinion pieces or things of that nature. Well, back then, you would stake your claim in the form of propaganda, and there might be people who come for me for this, was through the
The
metanetra that you
glyphs.
wrote. You
Mm.
told your story, you told the story you wanted the people to know, you told the story, you between you and the priests. You told the story that you basically wrote yourself the way that you wanted to be perceived, even in terms of how you presented in the drawings, in the statues, and so on. You determined what that would look like,
So it
right?
wasn't essentially a public record. It was more or less them just a PR campaign on the, you know,
We can definitely
self
call it
promotion.
that,
Self promotion.
because again, there was a very limited number of people who wrote and read.
Even though they had scribes.
Yes. So the scribes weren't the vast majority of the people. You had a limited number of people who were the scribes. You had a
Mm.
limited number of people, the elite, who were educated and literate in that sense. And so then you would also have all of these drawings that would tell a story.
Okay.
So you see the story of, you see the drawing of the god Amun crowning Hatshepsut. And whether I can read Metanetra or not, as a peasant back then, I see that, and I see that she has been ordained by the gods, if you will. I know what the gods look like.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now, understand that these temples that commoners like me are now trapezing through, and I would say actually disrespecting,
Yeah.
we're not open to the average um the average people of ancient Kemet. They were places where the priests and those who served the priests entered into and did incense and so on and so forth. And then there were outer courts where, during festival periods, the commoners could come and leave their offerings and make their prayers. But they did not enter into the Holy of
Oh,
Holies.
okay.
That
Okay.
was for the priests themselves.
Mm.
Just like if you would think of the Vatican today, the average Catholic is not just walking in through whatever and going into the crevices of the Vatican. There are courtyards and places for the masses.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then there are places that those who have attained a certain
Would,
yes, are able to enter into, right?
yeah.
So if that is a comparison that helps people um You
Understand.
can understand it that way.
Yeah.
Think of the White House, if you will, or 10 Downing Street, or any of these places. Everybody doesn't have access to everything. Okay. So like I said, so at her mortuary temple that is at Deir el Bari, and this is the temple that was carved out of a mountain. I don't see, like you see it, you see that first of all, um, these people must have been in very great shape. Now, all of these temples that we visited are now in areas that are considered deserts. But back then,
Mm-hmm.
the Nile, before the dam was built and all of that, actually they traveled by boat to these places. But the staircases alone leading to some of these temples, I mean, we were huffing and puffing, and some people didn't make it up. It was, of course, it was scorching hot. Um, but to think of the level of excellence, the ingenuity,
Mm.
and that these places were carved in such a way that there are multiple rooms, multiple statues. They had a way of design where from the outside the ceilings are higher and the floors lower, and as you go in, the ceiling comes like it like
Almost like a
yes.
closure. Yeah, yeah.
And so when you're in the Holy of Holies and you look out, it's this panoramic view. It's beyond anything that I can actually explain with words. So for anybody who has the resources, because it's not
There's
inexpensive
yeah, there's a
by my
pretty penny.
budget
It's
anyway.
a pretty penny.
Um, if you can make that trip next year, it's always the first 2 weeks of August, to go with Dr. Beatty and Dr. Carr. Absolutely amazing. But let's get back to Hatshepsut here. So we see the remarkable story that is inscribed in her temple. In one of them, the god Amun takes the form of her father, Thutmose I, and enters the chamber of her mother, Queen Amos, while her mother is, pregnant, about to give birth.
Mm-hmm.
The god Gnum, who is the potter of creation, then fashions Hatshepsut's body on his will. And the gods then proclaim that she will rule Egypt as Pharaoh. So obviously, you as a peasant, or even the priests, the scribes, whatever, you see this, and the message is she didn't just wake up and say, I'm going to be Pharaoh. This is
She's the
something,
chosen one.
yes, and was chosen at birth. The creator himself molded her, and we see that scene. And her father asked God Amun, basically saying she is going to be Pharaoh. So there's that divinity as well. And this was not merely myth, it was political theology. Again, as I said earlier, there's no separation of church and state. By embedding her divine birth in stone, Hatshepsut was not just declaring her, and again, words, the English language fails her. I want to say her rulership instead of her kingship. But she was not just saying, hey, this is human ambition. I saw an opening and I stepped in. She was basically saying, this is the will of the gods themselves. And for anyone who is religious or spiritual, when the gods speak, who are you to counteract the gods, right?
Yep.
So it gives this different level of legitimacy, if you will. So when Thutmose II died around 1479 BCE, Hatshepsut, the royal wife, became regent for the young Thutmose III. At first, she ruled in her name, but gradually her image and titles shifted. And so I gave you a list earlier of the different titles that she had. So when she is now known as Ma'at Keru, this is not, oh, I am ruling as a co-regent, which again, women had done quite a
Previously.
bit in the history of Mat Kare, had done quite a lot in the history of Egypt. but now it's I am ruling in my own power. So by 1473 BCE, she had taken what was at that point considered an unprecedented step of crowning herself Pharaoh. Now, again, this is not something that, like, actually, I'm not going to mention his name because he does not warrant in any way the little shitty prince that he is. He does not warrant being part of this conversation. But you don't just stand up and say, I'm going to be Pharaoh. There's a whole system in place that she would have had to ensure for her to now be crowned as Pharaoh. And as I said, she adopted the throne name Ma'at Kare, meaning truth is the soul of Ra. She appeared in the regalia of the pharaoh, the crown, the kilt, the crook, the flail, and even the false beard. So much so that some crazy writers are now saying she was a transvestite. Again, just, let me tell you how stupid that would be. That would be like, I typically wear a dress, but when I decide to run a marathon, I'm wearing shorts and a t-shirt. And someone now interpreting that and saying, well, she must have wanted to be a transvestite. It was the regalia of the time, and
Time,
she
yeah.
dressed in that way. Now, there are also statues showing her with the more feminine face, showing her with her breasts, showing her with, as our young people would say today, a snatched waist. Um, when she was younger. And then there's certainly a lot of statues showing her in the manner that pharaohs were always shown. Though
Mm.
all those pharaohs didn't have chiseled washboard abs and all of that as we see it, but that was how they were presented. And that is also how she presented most of the time. But the whole argument being put forth by some people now to say she was a transvestite or she did not want to be feminine, um, I believe that there's other information and literature and statues and all of that to show that that is a reach. But again, people are going to write whatever they need to write to get their PhDs and to stay relevant and sell books and so on and so forth. So for about 6 years, from 1970, sorry, 19, no, 1479 to
14.
1473 BCE, she ruled as co-regent. And then for the next 15 years, from 1473 to 1458, she reigned as pharaoh in her own right. This made her one of the longest ruling female monarchs of the ancient world. I would argue it probably ranks her as one of the longest
Longest
female
serving.
monarchs, period. I mean, I know that, Queen Elizabeth stayed forever and a
The
day,
second. The second.
but the second, sorry. Um, but again, just putting this in context. And unlike Queen Elizabeth, where the second,
The
where
second.
it was mostly ceremonial, Hatshepsut was actually the ruler. It
Ruling. Yeah.
wasn't just ceremonial, right? So her reign is marked not by endless war,
Mm.
but by stability, diplomacy, and prosperity. Now, some would argue, okay, but towards the end of her reign, by the time Thutmose III came in, he did have to now go back to war and all of that. But even he very quickly also tried to build on the prosperity of some of the building works that she did in Egypt. And if you're ever able to visit the Temple of Karnak, that is where had taken the obelisk that I was telling you that's 100 feet tall. That is where it resides. There are others that were destroyed, um, but you can see the very ambitious um, building projects that she put in place. So one of the main expeditions that she's very well known for, and this is depicted in her temple, is the expedition to Punt, Punt. About around her ninth year as pharaoh, she launched this famous expedition. People are saying Punt is likely in the Horn of Africa.
Yep.
And the reliefs at this temple of hers show Egyptian ships laden with gold, ivory, ebony, baboons, leopard skins, myrrh trees uprooted and brought back to Egyptian soil. Myrrh and frankincense were very important to the Egyptians because they used them to make incense, and the incense was heavily used by the priesthood in all the temples. And there were temples, a lot of temples, a lot of temples in Egypt. Many of them are under sea now. Many of them we probably are not even aware of. Um, it was more than just exotic luxury for her at that time. Incense, like I said, was sacred for temple rituals to Amun, and by securing this incense, or the raw material for the incense, Hatshepsut was able to link Egypt's prosperity directly to divine worship. So you can imagine, if this is let's again trying to bring it back to things that people can relate to.
Relator. Yeah.
If you are the president who was able to oversee man walking on the moon, it gives you a whole different level of prestige, right? And so for her to have overseen this expedition to punt, for it to have been as successful as it was, to bring back the goods necessary for them to continue to worship their god, definitely gave her added, if you will, kudos, right? It's
Yeah.
like, wow, for her to have done that, she truly has been ordained by the gods. So she reinforced Egypt's hold over Nubia, and you can decide how you feel about that, because Nubia is definitely where you had the darker skinned people who look like us. I
Yeah.
have lots of pictures that we took when we went to a village in Aswan, and just being around the Nubian people. But she was able to secure the gold mines in Nubia. She maintained open trade with the Levant and the Mediterranean, ensuring steady supplies of timber, copper, and precious stones. And she favored diplomacy over conquest. So, unlike her father and her stepson, she did not necessarily glorify the battlefield, although she understood the importance of securing the borders. But she sent soldiers, so she did send soldiers to secure the borders, but she built her legacy on commerce and cultural exchange.
So she didn't build a wall.
Well, they certainly had walls. All of the temples were enclosed by walls, because again, average people couldn't just walk in and walk around. So for me, it was like, wait a second, you're just smoking in these places. What is wrong with you? But that was my issue, not anybody else's. But so there were certainly walls, but she was open to
To
cultural exchanges and not
okay.
just always battling. She inscribed her reign on the landscape itself. And that is why, although there are different theories as to why it appears that there was there was a very specific goal to erase her, it was not, they were not able to accomplish it. So as I've already mentioned, Deir El Bari, the temple, is a masterpiece of architecture.
Mm.
It has terraces, pillared colonnades carved into cliffs. It tells her story in stone, which is harder to just rip up. We see in the United States of America, they assault on museums, they assault on books, and so on and so forth. She carved it into stone. Yes,
Hence the expression written in stone.
written in stone, yes.
Yeah.
Her divine birth, her
Mhm.
coronation, and her expedition to Punt. So you will see parts of the different temples where it's like they have chiseled
Chiseled.
out her whole face, but then you can still see the body,
Speaking
or you
of
can still see the cartouche, and the cartouche will always have the name of the person. Yes, please go ahead.
yeah, speaking of the face, what is it about the broken noses?
Which so it's so interesting you asked that question because I kept taking pictures and it's like the noses that were intact will be more noses that were more narrow, not noses that look like yours and mine. And the noses that we assume were, broken, defaced,
Mm-hmm.
or whatever, probably were more of our noses. What's interesting is when you read the books on Hatshepsut and the family, the Tutmos family, they talk about how they had broad noses. Certainly, you can still see the lips on the parts where they leave the lips.
Yeah.
So definitely a history of trying to
Erasure.
whitewash.
Mm.
If we cannot deny the magnificence of ancient Kemet,
We can blur
then
the.
what we can say is, but it wasn't dark skinned black people. It
Mm.
wasn't black people. It was other people. And there were different invaders who also attempted to erase just the history. When we talk about the Holocaust people and so on and so forth, but yes, the definitely very strategic in which noses were vandalized. So in addition to carving her birth, her divine birth, her coronation, and her expedition in stone at her temple in Deir el Bari.
Yeah.
She also had Karnak Temple, which I referenced earlier, where she erected obelisks of red granite, um, and they're still surviving today. The tallest one being over 100 feet. She commissioned hundreds of statues, some showing her as female, others as a masculine pharaoh. This was not confusion. This was not her being a transvestite. This was strategy, blending identities to redefine that kingship. She was basically owning who she is. Yes, I am Pharaoh, and as Pharaoh, this is how I present. But I am also
And also,
female.
yeah.
I am also woman. Um, in that time, although perhaps the distinctions weren't as clear as how we now live them in this patriarchal society. Because as you can see, that royal lineage was actually clearer through the mother, which makes sense. You always know where the baby came out of,
True.
but you can't always prove that the semen was from, which male it was from. So that's just common sense, really,
Mm-hmm.
period. That for
That's
any society, if you really want to know where the child, whose child it is, trace it through the mother.
that is why I think it's the Ghanaians
Hmm.
trace is
Yes, very much
matrilineal. Yeah.
matrilineal.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So I'm gonna get a little salacious here, and again, they're gonna be Egyptologists who, if they ever watch this little segment, might be like, "What?" But so there is a man,
Hey.
yes, who was known as Senanmut. And there are some stories about whether he was really her true love, right?
Oh.
So she married Thutmose II because this is what you do, but whether there was really someone who was more of her confidant. He was born a commoner,
Oh.
yes, but under Hatshepsut, he rose to hold more than 25 titles. Some say he was the architect of her monument. Some people don't agree with that, and they point to by the 16th year of her reign, he kind of like faded from history. We don't find him. We know that he had a tomb built, but they say his body was actually never there. Um, but we know that he was a steward of Neferure, who was the daughter of Hatshepsut and the pharaoh, Thutmose II. We know that he was overseer of works. He designed Deir el Bari and he managed many of her vast building campaigns.
Hmm.
Um, Much later, there's some graffiti that was found at her temple depicting him, sentiment in some explicit scenes with a woman who they
Oh,
claim is Hatshepsut, but the chances that the
hello.
queen would have, sorry, that the pharaoh would have depicted herself in that way is ridiculous at best.
So how did the
Um,
drawing get there?
we don't know. We know she wasn't the one doing the drawing. We don't know exactly when the drawing showed up, but and whether it was her or someone else or whatever.
So
So
she had a side piece.
I am not claiming that at all. But we do know that his closeness to her was unprecedented for a man of non-royal birth. But as I said, around the 16th year of her reign, he kind of disappears from history. His tomb was left unfinished, his body never found. And so that is yet another mysterious part of,
Mm.
Hatshepsut's reign. What happened to him? Did he have a falling out with her? What went on? We don't know. So she died around 1458 BCE. It's said that she was probably about 50 years old. Um, Now, there's some assertion about CT scans of her mommy suggesting that she had bone cancer, but then there are other books that have been written that say they're not really sure that they really did recover her body, because with the tomb robbers and all of that, they were mommies moved and bodies moved. There
Oh,
is a tomb with the nurse that took care of her citrate, where there are two bodies in there, and they're saying one is the nurse and one is her, and that the other body was obese. Looks like it could have been her body, but again,
but
I don't have information that says for sure.
okay. So, but
Yeah,
question would be, I thought the mummies, the pharaohs were prepared in a specific way for the afterlife. Could
they
that not
were,
have been an indication of
they
who was?
were, but
Hmm.
we also know that many of the bodies, by the time they were recovered, the tomb robbers had already disturbed the bodies. Some
Oh,
of the
okay.
bodies were not intact. Some had been bandaged and rebandaged, and so on and so forth. So there's still a lot of work to be done. And I'm not sure that we are necessarily the ones doing that work. And there's always the lens through which you look at things.
Mm, okay.
So this is really important for us to, what one of my lessons from visiting Kemet now twice is not just looking at ancient history, as in, okay, I've gone and I've looked at Kemet and I want to study that, but it's also tracing where we are and understanding our history and connecting the dots. So I actually did a presentation while we were in Kemet this time, and what I had done was do research on the Ijaw people, and that's my quote unquote ethnic group, and begin to trace our migration. And some scholars, which would make sense because all humanity began in one place and then
Hmm.
people migrated, but we are basically tracing our lineage back to the Nile Valley, and just showing how, using following the waterways and with boats, we moved from the Nile Valley area to the Niger Delta in Nigeria. Um, but I say all of this to say the importance of us
Understanding.
keeping records of our own lives, and then also studying the lives of those who've come before us, and making sure that we are telling our own stories. And that is one of the reasons why we are doing this series on women and resistance, to tell the stories of women who've come before us, many of whom history has tried to erase,
Yeah.
and to help men and women reimagine how we can live today. I don't know that when Hatshepsut lived that she was thinking, okay, I'm going to be the
Ru-
female quote unquote leader, Pharaoh, and then after that, there'll be no more behind me, or let me open the door for more to come in. I think it's important to own who you are in the moment and to be the most excellent version of yourself as you can.
Yeah.
Karen says only one black led expedition and excavation recovery of a Kemetic tomb. Yes. And I will not go into more detail about that, but Karen, if you go and research I believe the Egyptian government has actually told that one black expedition leader, if you will, that he can no longer be affiliated with that tomb. But you can go research that and see. Okay, so after her death, Tutmos III took full power. This was her stepson. It is said that nearly 20 years later that he ordered her statues to be smashed and her cartouches to be erased and her images replaced. Some, speculate that it was because he had all this animosity towards her because she had taken over as pharaoh when initially started as co-regent. Some others say it wasn't quite that nefarious, that it was really every pharaoh tried to emphasize themselves in their own reign, and he did reign for a significant amount of time, and so he was just trying to make sure that
The
the
focus
focus
was
was
on
on
him.
him.
Yeah.
Some others speculate that there were others who wanted to get rid of her because it was kind of like an abomination to have this female in this role. And so we may never know the true story, or perhaps as more excavations happen, we may find more writings or information that sheds more light. But certainly, in one of the temples, they have a list of the kings, a list of the pharaohs, and she is notoriously not on that list. Neither is Akhenaten. And Akhenaten is another pharaoh who kind of bucked the system and created his own.
Style.
Yes, and he attempted to replace Amun as the main god and to put it at 10. And so
Oh.
some again, you, when we talk about drama and what do they call those things that people watch, soap operas and
Soap
all of
opera.
that.
Hmm.
um Again, that question of is it life imitating art or art imitating life?
Imitating life. Yeah.
Egypt certainly had a lot of intrigue and a lot of stories that could be told. But her resistance endured, her legacy endures. In the 19th century, archaeologists uncovered her temple and her obelisks. In 1903, Howard Carter, and I hate to mention these people's names because these people were opportunists, found her tomb. We know what they shared with the with Egypt. We know what they've taken to the museums across the world, and we will never know possibly all that they have in their personal collections that belong to
Mm.
us. It is said that in 2007, her mommy was identified through DNA and CT scans. Today, historians are recognizing her as one of Egypt's greatest rulers, and her resistance definitely lay in claiming the throne when custom, for the most part, did not have a woman outright claim pharaohship. Redefining that reign to include prosperity, diplomacy, and monumental architecture, and of course, inscribing her reign in stone so that she is not
Yeah.
they could not erase her.
Yeah.
So she definitely resisted the silence of history. She definitely resisted the confines of gender and power, particularly as we know them today. And even though, for whatever reasons, people try to chisel her name from stone, her legacy literally rises from the cliffs of Deir el Bari, and of course, the obelisk of Karnak. And she reminds us that resistance, I think, is not just rebellion, it is the audacity to fully exist in spaces that may want to deny your presence. And
Mm.
so today we see a very brave sister. I might go to the Capitol tomorrow if she's
Oh, the
still
lady.
there,
Yeah.
in Texas, who says, no, I'm
Um,
not signing a paper that says that the Department of Public Safety gets to escort
follow
and
me to
follow
the.
me
Yeah.
everywhere I go because I am not a criminal. I've done nothing. This is a so called democracy, and she's been in the Capitol. I would have to check to see what the latest updates are, but as of a few hours ago, she was
She
still
was
in the
still on the floor.
Capitol.
Yeah,
And just crazy things happening. Another representative who was out running, and apparently whoever they had assigned to her could not keep up with her, lost her on the trail, and wants to get upset and find other ways to restrict her. It's amazing. It's 2025, and so having the audacity to exist fully in spaces, to carve your truth so deeply that the world, no matter how hard people try to erase you, has to remember who you are. And so, as a woman, I say that I hold up her name for women everywhere, whether you're a teacher, whether you're a grandmother, whether you're a nurse, whether you're an attorney, whether you're a stay-at-home mom, whether you're a wife, whether you're a daughter, an accountant, whatever it is that you do,
sure.
showing up and fully embodying whoever it is you believe God to have created you to be,
Yeah.
regardless of what the pushback will be. um so yeah, that's just some information on the amazing Hatshepsut, who will not be erased.
Speaking of will not be erased, you raised up a book earlier. You might want to show that.
Yes, this is
And
one of many. There are
and
lots
for
of
the
different
listeners,
books.
what's the name of the book?
It is Hatshepsut, the Female Pharaoh by Joyce Tildesley. And it's got some really great pictures from. So if you can see this is Karnak, and you can see that Teknon in the background. Um, this is one of the carving statues of her as a sphinx.
Mm. It still
Um,
has a nose there.
yes, this is the red granite. But then this is another one. She doesn't have a nose on this one. Um, this is for the Pharaoh Hatshepsut and her son, Tutmos the Third, her stepson. But you could see here she is fully dressed in the
Yeah.
Pharaoh regalia, no breasts and all of that. But then here is a statue where you can definitely see her feminine form, and you can see her chest there. So yes, they were definitely different. This is a rendering. It's going to be hard for you to see it,
Yeah.
but basically, um, this was Hatshepsut as the pharaoh offering before the bark of Amen. And so yes, and this is the temple of Amen at Karnak.
Oh,
Look at, I mean, and this is it in runes. So when you see some of the columns that still show
the
the
detail.
colors and the details, and you get a sense of what this place must have looked like. Absolutely mind blowing what they were able to accomplish back then.
Yes, yes. History has a way of pointing, going back to your neck of the woods when your president decided um, the focus on
Who's president? Not mine. But please carry on.
when okay, when the president in Seaton decided the focus on the United States past is too much for him to bear. I suppose that's him indicating that truth is still a currency. Unfortunately, that's which he cannot afford. So he's
Yes.
going to try as much as possible to ensure that that is not going to be a common theme.
And that is why, more than ever, we cannot depend on others to tell our story, others to think for us.
Mm.
So I'm very grateful for you and this platform and the work that you do week in and week out, not just with Women and Resistance, but also with African News Review, because it is important that we are paying attention, we are telling our truths, we are um, speaking up against the lies and the propaganda, and that we are showing up as our very full selves on a daily basis, which does require courage. But then the alternative is to
Rolled over,
die,
a rollover.
yeah, roll over, and for your life to have not mattered at all.
Yeah.
And then for the lives of your ancestors also to have been in vain.
Now, I will also say the same of you in the sense that when you came up with the idea of rethinking freedom, yes, we might be free. We engage in sometimes farcical discourse because you can go online. There are hours and hours of nonsensical topics, maybe to me, but somebody else might find them truly engaging. But in light of the assault on your freedom and you want to play pretend, it's truly, truly remarkable. It's shocking. I
Yeah,
mean, uh, the world over, there is this global assault on realism. Y- People want to, draw up this kind of imaginary world of, oh, what you're feeling is not real.
yeah,
So go back into your box. But then in England here, people are being arrested for showing disdain for an ongoing genocide in another part of the world. You guys had it earlier, but you're still living through it. And it, I'll just give you a quick one. The president has a White House feed on Facebook. When you go on there and you just read some of the and you read some of the postings on there, it's like, really?
yeah.
Really?
And people who are not paying attention, or are just not used to thinking, you swallow this hook, line, and sinker, and then it affects how you then show up. And so we understand that we are in the position that we are in the United States, and that is affecting the entire world,
Mm,
because some people bought into the propaganda that a man who had been convicted of 34 felonies, who had been convicted of sexually assaulting a woman,
led an insurrection.
was and led an insurrection, was better equipped to lead this country and to provide for their personal economic benefit than a woman who was of Jamaican ancestry, um, which
Of
is something
Indian
that they
ancestry.
highlighted, Indian ancestry, and happened to be female. And so people either chose to disengage and not vote. Some people chose to vote for him. We know that more people did not vote than that voted for him. But now the entire world is suffering, because it's not just the United States, the erasure of healthcare, schools being threatened, museums being threatened, cities being occupied, the weaponization of ICE, the disappearing of people. It's also wholesale, like you and I discussed. For those who want to go back and look at the
Rethinking
last,
freedom.
yeah, the last episode of Rethinking Freedom, people who are going to die of AIDS and HIV because the medication is available, but it's being destroyed
Destroyed.
as opposed to letting people have it.
I mean,
Same thing with contraception, same thing with food.
food.
Farmers not just being told not to grow things and being compensated for not to grow, but for the excess food to be destroyed rather
Destroyed.
than to feed people. And in the last really 20 years, over 80,000, over 80, something like 80 trillion being siphoned off from the poorest of the world and being put into the hands of
Yeah.
an elite.
Private.
So when
Yeah.
people say, "Oh, we have more billionaires than ever," how? And
Yeah.
people say, "Oh, may you be the next billionaire in your family," and at whose cost? And so there's so much going on right now that we must speak up about. We must fight back against. We must fight against. And I'm grateful for the work that you're doing. One last thing that I want to say, because I know a lot of people who watch this also may be aware of In Class with Cara, which is on YouTube. And some of you also, maybe like we mentioned earlier, Nubia Narrative. Lorna, thank you so much. Really appreciate you. Thank you, Karen, as well.
Yeah.
I
Thank
do
you.
want to say this. So last week we were supposed to do Hatshepsut, and I was in Egypt, and I'd done my research and was ready to go, but I was in such physical pain. I was having some issues with my knee, and I was in such physical pain that I knew that I could not sit in front of a camera and speak coherently for 60 minutes. And what hit me as I was watching In Class with Car this past week is for 284 weeks
Mm-hmm.
straight,
Mm.
I just have to say this publicly, because just like we're giving flowers to these women, we need to. I feel like I need to give flowers to this man as he's living. It was We were supposed to go live at 2 a.m. Egyptian time. At 1:37, I was in so much pain, and that although I just did not want to do it, I texted you and I said we have to postpone.
Yeah.
And to know that I've not been able to go, what? I don't know how many episodes have we
It
done?
will be 28,
Okay.
29.
So I've not been able to go 28 in a
Shock
row,
it. Shock it.
right? And this gentleman has, come rain, high water, the the transition of his mother, illness, times when we would not ever know what was going on behind the scenes. He's shown up every week
For
for
five
two
ye-
hours,
for 5 years and 4 months.
weaving together all kinds of history. I mean, we're dealing with one topic. He like writes 3 books in one session, pulling together things and this analysis with this power and passion and intellect and brilliance for 284 straight sessions. I was like, listen,
That,
until you start doing this work, you don't even begin to understand.
yeah. 5 years.
Yes,
5 years, 4 months.
yes.
5 year, 4 months. And I can say where I was when I started watching. In fact, I would say I was part of the first episode, part of the very first one. Because when he came on, you still remember it, it was during lockdown. It was in the middle of May. I was going towards the kettle, and he said something. He said, the history of African people stretches as far as the Caribbean, Africa, through writing. And then he mentioned Chinua Achebe. And I'm
Chile.
like, who
What
are
does
you?
he know about
Exactly.
Chile?
I'm like, who are you again? And then I sat, and from then on, I mean, even just watching, I have missed a couple of weeks just watching.
Just
But
watching, not
yeah, not me. So just watching, I've missed a couple of weeks, birthdays, football practice for the kids and stuff like that. But what I find is when you come back and watch it, you feel pained missing it. It's not like, oh, it's just one of them. You feel pained. I mean, the man was there during the insurrection. He was there during the passing of Ruth Gator Ginsburg. He told us, he even predicted what is happening right now. And so again, it goes to show that when you see someone doing the work quietly, because the man doesn't, he
So it's
doesn't
not.
do
Yeah,
the,
it's
you know,
not a lot of fan. He doesn't have a whole lot
he
of guy.
doesn't
It's
do
not.
the
Yeah,
fanfare,
yeah.
you know, doesn't
But
do the fanfare.
it just gave me having to text you because I was trying really hard and having to text you and say I don't have the bandwidth to be able to sit in front of a camera and be coherent right now because I am in physical pain and just thinking, wow, we do need to. It's easy to criticize. It's easy to say what people aren't doing, but you got to give people their
Yeah,
due.
yeah, yeah. I
And
mean, I,
that level of commitment day in day out, that I have a
the,
whole new appreciation for it.
the one other thing I want to mention, actually two. One is the fact that he taught me how to read again.
Mm,
It's not that I don't read. Most of my reading was basically, geopolitics and stuff like that. But he showed me how to not only read, what to read, and how to understand what you're reading.
make the connections. Yeah,
Make the connection. Don't just, you're not just reading for reading's sake.
yeah.
There were times I would come in just to spy on a stack of books, which has since disappeared. You know, the stack of books. That way I know what he's reading at any point in time. You
Mm.
know, and again, I mean, kudos to him, man. Listen, that 5 years, the world in terms of how one engages with knowledge is just gone elsewhere. So for me personally, I've been enriched in that 5 years.
Yes.
Um, yeah. So even the time I spend is minuscule in comparison to what I've gained from him. Is you know. So I gotta
So
give him.
so it is my commitment to should there be any other reasons for me to feel the need to postpone. So they said you was definitely ready to go to grit my teeth and yeah, because
Because the man, don't forget, the man also did an episode of Office Hours. We're talking about in class with Carl. We're not talked about office hours yet. Okay,
yeah.
so maybe most people might not be able to see the office hours. But the
Hmm.
office hours, you remember the episode when he came on and he was basically choking
Yeah,
for breath.
yeah.
And he refused to I mean, that is dedication. But
Well, or
you know,
lunacy. There's a fine line between the two. There's a fine line between the two.
yeah, but still.
Yeah, because self care is important too.
No, he is, I mean, he
Yeah,
is, we have to, and I want to beg people to do something. Maybe this is part of, appreciation. Can we also take it upon ourselves when he asks us to read, to at least read,
that part. Yeah,
please?
yeah, yeah.
I mean, that's our own little way of saying thank you.
Yeah,
Just
to
read.
actually engage him in the text because he
Yes.
does want people to engage him in the
Eh,
text, and I think it would probably be a little. I know I would be a little frustrated if I'm talking, teaching, whatever, and everybody comes and talks about everything else except what I was talking about. It's like, wait a second, was I just here entertaining you? But
but he's magnanimous alone.
yeah,
He's magnanimous enough
yeah.
to,
But again,
engage.
and then someone said it in the chat.
Mm,
That how did she say, when you are living, Karen says, when you're living your purpose, it's never work. That's something that he has said. And I think it's also just understanding that your purpose is your purpose regardless of how people respond to it. So as a gardener or a farmer or whatever, I often think about planting seeds, and I don't have any control over what seed is going to grow. I do my part and then just trust that what is going to grow is going to grow, and what is going to produce, and so on and so forth. And
mm,
so I think, I don't know, but he may just have the mindset of, hey, I do my work. And who takes it, who runs with it, who grows from it, who applies it, that is not what he has to focus on, because he can't control what other people do. But it's to do his part. And I think if each of us showed up and did our part, not I
Yeah.
think, I know, you know, what a difference we would make in the world. Lorna says
Hmm.
Dr. Carr has a lot of respect for you and Adesoji's knowledge. Well, then we've
You must be doing
we've
something
we've
right.
accomplished something little,
You
something good.
must be doing
But yeah,
something right.
definitely,
Yeah.
I would much rather just be sitting and learning from him than acting like I could go to
Mm-mm.
it on any level, go toe to toe. Maybe on gardening I could. Maybe on gardening I got him on that one.
Uh,
That would probably be it. Well,
I'm just glad to be a student. I mean, like I said, going towards the kettle, hearing Chino Achebe, it was like, okay. And then we've read multiple books from various authors, some of which I might not even have come across. That's
mm,
and some of them that have been moving with, but didn't really understand the significance of which.
hmm,
Ayikuyama,
yeah,
you know?
yeah,
So
yeah.
yes.
So who are we doing next week?
Yes. Next week would be the lady who gave us the quotation, no humans involved. Sylvia Winter. So we'll be looking at the lives and times of Sylvia Winter, the writer, essayist.
And she is still living.
She
So
is still living.
that is gonna be interesting to see how she lets me show up. She is
Yeah,
still living.
she's still
Yes.
living in
Yes.
Cuba, of all
Yes.
places. So,
Yes.
yes, thank you all for coming through. And yes, we continue to learn. And again, we'll give people their flowers from time to time. They might even still be around us. But again, like my people would say, um, speak, speak well of the elders while they're still around. Don't
Mm,
wait till they're gone and
mm.
start beating yourself, throwing yourself on the ground, crying. And
That part.
but so next week we're looking at the life and times of Sylvia Winter. Sister,
Well, again, thank you, brother. It's been an honor to work with you. Continues to be an honor, and this continues to push me to do my work and to show up. So thank you so much for the opportunity.
again, yes, it's been Women and Resistance. Again, next week, Sylvia Winter. Until then, good night.
Like, share, subscribe.
Subscribe, yes, all the good stuff. Like, share, subscribe. And yes, you can also download the audio version of this podcast on all podcast platforms, Spotify, you name it, it's all there. Only iHeartRadio, that's the only place you can get it. But everywhere else, yes. And yeah, so until next week, good night and
Good night.
God bless.